My name is Fiona Merritt. I am 69 years old, a retired school librarian who still arranges her spices in alphabetical order because order has always helped me breathe. On Christmas morning, my daughter invited me over and handed me a special cup of tea she said she had made just for me. Those were her exact words. "A special tea for you, Mom." If anyone had told me that moment would change the direction of my entire life, I would not have believed them. Her house smelled like pine and cinnamon. The tree lights blinked in soft patterns across the living room. Lydia stood at the kitchen doorway with a smile so round it looked rehearsed. Her eyes were bright, too bright for a quiet holiday morning. She held the porcelain cup with both hands as if to make sure I did not refuse. I thanked her and tried to ignore the uneasy thrum rising inside my chest. Grant, my son-in-law, moved about the living room in a way that did not fit the season. He pretended to adjust a string of Christmas lights that had already been perfectly placed. He kept his back turned to me a little too long. When he finally faced me, his smile faltered, and his gaze darted toward the cup in my hand. That was the first moment I felt the air shift. I had raised children. I had worked 4 decades around hundreds of students. I knew the signs of someone hiding something, and the room felt heavier than it should. Lydia urged me to drink while it was still warm. Her voice carried a slight tremor under its sweetness, so I made a quiet choice. As she turned to check the oven, I set my cup down and casually reached for the mug of tea sitting near Grant. He had been sipping from it earlier. My hands moved with the steady calm I used to shelve rare books. No one noticed the switch except Lydia. She froze for a single second, a tiny fracture in her polished expression. She almost spoke, but the words refused to leave her mouth. Grant took a deep drink. I watched the muscles in his throat tighten. He did not taste anything unusual. He sat back on the couch, wiped his forehead, and let out a breath. Lydia glanced at him, then at me, then back at him again. 15 minutes later, he pressed his hand to his temple. His voice thinned as he told Lydia he felt lightheaded. She laughed nervously and said he must have stood up too fast. 20 minutes later, he was no longer laughing. Beads of sweat gathered along his hairline. His legs trembled each time he tried to rise. By the 30th minute, he could not stand at all. Lydia panicked. She grabbed her phone and called for help. Her voice shot through the room in frantic bursts. When she ended the call, she rushed to Grant, lifting his shoulders and pleading for him to breathe slowly. Not once did she turn to me. Not once did she ask if I was all right or if I had touched anything strange. I stood by the window, watching snow settle on the quiet street outside. In the reflection of the glass, I saw their movements behind me. I also saw something else. Across the yard, my neighbor Elliot Barnes stood on his porch, pausing mid-step. He looked toward Lydia's house with a puzzled expression, as if sensing something unspoken vibrating through the winter air. His presence flickered only for a moment, yet it pressed itself into my memory with surprising clarity. That was the nature of reflective souls. They noticed storms before others felt the wind. Inside the house, Lydia cried out again for Grant to stay awake. She kept repeating that everything would be fine. Her voice cracked in places she tried desperately to smooth over. She never once asked whether I was feeling dizzy or strange. Her silence toward me was the loudest sound in that room. As the sirens approached, I rested a hand on the windowsill. Snowflakes drifted downward in soft spirals glowing under the pale morning light. I felt an old ache rise in my chest. Years of sacrifices, years of giving, years of believing love would eventually be enough. I thought of the nights I stayed awake to help Lydia with her school projects, the years we celebrated holidays with joy, the endless ways a mother loves without keeping count. But as I stood in that decorated living room, with chaos unfolding only a few feet away, something colder than the snow settled over me. A realization neither sharp nor sudden, but weighted and patient, like truth revealing itself only when a person is finally ready to see it. That Christmas morning, I understood something I should have learned a long time ago. Not every silence is gentle, not every stillness is safe, and not every smile from someone you love means you should trust them. That Christmas morning, I realized that some kinds of silence aren't necessarily gentle. If you're listening to this story and want to continue this journey with me, please like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Every support you give helps me tell more healing and empowering stories. When I returned to my own house that evening, the quiet settled around me in a way that felt heavier than usual. The events of that Christmas morning lingered in my thoughts like a draft slipping under a closed door. I hung my coat by the entryway and stood for a moment, letting the silence shape itself. For years, I had tried to believe that distance between a mother and her child was just a season, something that might pass if one stayed patient enough. Yet the memory of Lydia's bright smile and the absence of concern when Grant crumpled to the floor replayed in my mind with a quieter, sharper edge. I walked into the living room and noticed the soft blue scarf folded neatly over the back of my armchair. Harold had knitted it for me during his final winter. He worked on it at the kitchen table each night, murmuring that the rhythm calmed him. The yarn was the color of a clear December sky. I traced the stitches with my fingers. That scarf had become an anchor without me realizing it, a small reminder of a love that had never required performance or conditions. Each year, I wore it to Lydia's gatherings, a way of carrying Harold with me. I wondered now if she had ever truly seen it or understood its meaning. The house felt colder than usual, so I draped the scarf around my shoulders and made myself a cup of peppermint tea. As the kettle hissed, my thoughts drifted to past Christmases. Lydia had once been a child who searched my face for approval when she unwrapped her presents. In her teenage years, she became more distant, speaking in short phrases and offering quick hugs before rushing off to her friends. Her adulthood carried a deeper aloofness. She invited me to holidays because it seemed expected, not because she wished for my presence. Grant was polite when we first met, then slowly retreated into a cool formality that never quite thawed. During each gathering, I tried to make conversation, bring thoughtful gifts, and keep peace in the room, believing that my efforts would eventually bridge whatever gap existed. Instead, the distance grew in subtle increments until it felt like two separate worlds were sharing the same table. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. When I opened the door, Elliot Barnes stood on my porch holding a small tin decorated with red cardinals. His cheeks were pink from the cold, and he offered a warm smile that briefly softened the weight inside my chest. He lived alone in the house beside mine and had done so since his wife passed 5 years earlier. Every holiday he baked too many cookies and delivered them to the neighbors. It had become a gentle ritual between us. He glanced at the scarf around my shoulders, then back at my face. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, something like concern. He asked how my visit with Lydia had gone. His tone was casual, but he watched me a little too closely, as if guessing that I had returned earlier than planned. I thanked him for the cookies and said the gathering had been quiet. It was the easiest truth I could offer. He shifted his weight and cleared his throat, hesitating before speaking again. He told me he had seen Lydia at the bank earlier that week. She had parked carelessly, rushed across the lot, and disappeared inside with an expression he could not quite name. He said it lightly, as if it were nothing more than neighborhood chatter, yet the words settled unevenly in my thoughts. I felt my breath pause for a fraction of a second. There was no reason for Lydia to visit my bank unless she needed something specific. She managed her finances elsewhere. I asked Elliot when he had seen her, and he gave a vague answer saying it must have been midweek. He added that she looked hurried, almost unsettled, though he could not be sure. He apologized for mentioning it and said he was probably imagining things. I assured him it was fine and thanked him again before he walked back across the snowy lawn. His footprints formed a narrow path in the pale light when I closed the door. The house felt quieter than it had before. The tea in my cup had cooled. I lifted it slowly, letting the scent rise toward me, and sat down in Harold's old armchair. My scarf warmed my neck, yet a chill coiled beneath my ribs. The image of Lydia moving quickly through the glass doors of the bank played in my mind with unwelcome clarity. I tried to dismiss it as coincidence, but the thought refused to soften. I remembered the file she had handed me during Thanksgiving. I had not opened it. I had trusted my daughter and placed it in the drawer by the fridge, intending to review it eventually. Something about Elliot's remark nudged that memory to the surface. A quiet unease began to gather, subtle at first, then steadier. I sat there in the dimming afternoon light and felt the shape of something shifting inside me. The world had not changed since this morning, yet my understanding of it had begun to tilt, almost imperceptibly, like the first crack in solid ice. And I knew this was only the beginning. Sleep rarely comes easily on winter nights, but that night it refused to come at all. I lay in bed with the blue scarf still around my shoulders, unable to shake the growing tension that pressed against my ribs. Snow tapped softly against the window. The house felt too still, as if holding its breath. My phone buzzed near the lamp. When I reached for it, the screen lit up with a message from Lydia. She wrote that she hoped I had arrived home safely, and that I should call her when I had a moment. Her tone was polite in a distant way, the kind of message one might send to an acquaintance out of obligation. It lacked warmth, lacked the urgency that should have followed everything that had happened in her living room. I read the message twice before setting the phone down. A part of me wanted to believe she was reaching out, yet the words felt rehearsed, as if written by someone avoiding the weight of the morning. I closed my eyes and tried to rest. But each time I drifted toward sleep, the image of Grant collapsing replayed with stunning clarity. The way his legs buckled, the confusion in his eyes, the sharp inhale from Lydia when she realized I had switched the cups. My mind circled each detail as if trying to stitch together a pattern I was not yet ready to see. I turned on my side and pulled the blanket closer, but my thoughts refused to soften. I had lived long enough to recognize the difference between fear and intuition. Fear shouts, intuition whispers. That night, intuition pressed gently at my awareness, coaxing me to stay awake and listen. Something about the morning had been wrong in a way I could not name yet. I kept replaying the smallest fragments. Lydia's voice urged me to drink quickly, Grant's forced smile, the way neither of them had looked directly at me until after I swallowed. Unable to stay in bed any longer, I pushed myself up and walked down the dark hallway toward the kitchen. The floorboards were cold under my feet, grounding me as I moved. I turned on the small light above the stove. Its yellow glow filled the kitchen with a muted warmth that contrasted sharply with the chill beneath my skin. I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. The silence around me seemed to hum with unanswered questions. As I lifted the glass, my gaze landed on the corner of the refrigerator door. A thin folder rested in the basket beside it, tucked under an old grocery list. The sight triggered a faint memory. Lydia handed me a document during Thanksgiving. She had said it was a new insurance form she needed me to sign. I had been busy preparing dinner and set it aside, promising myself I would look at it later. Somehow, later had never arrived. A quiet unease rippled through me. I set the glass down and reached for the folder. The textured paper felt unfamiliar under my fingertips, as if it belonged to someone else's life. The kitchen seemed to slow down at that moment. I heard the low hum of the refrigerator, steady and rhythmic. The warm light cast long shadows across the floor. My breath created a faint mist in the cool air. Every detail sharpened, as if the world were narrowing itself to the single choice I was about to make. I opened the folder. At first, I saw the bold print at the top of the document. It made little sense to me. My eyes moved down the page, searching for clarity, until they reached a line that caused my heartbeat to falter. It was not an insurance form. It was a power of attorney document naming Lydia as my full agent, granting her complete authority over my finances, my decisions, and my future. My signature sat at the bottom in hurried strokes that did not resemble my careful handwriting. I felt a chill sweep through me that had nothing to do with the cold floor. I read the document again to be certain. Each line tightened the hollow feeling in my chest. I had taught students for decades to read critically, to question what lay beneath the surface of a text. Yet I had not questioned my own daughter when she handed me this form. I had trusted the gesture, not the content. I sank into the kitchen chair, the folder open on the table before me. The truth flickered at the edge of my awareness. The morning's odd details, Lydia's forced smile, Grant's unease, Elliot's quiet remark about seeing her at the bank. In that moment, everything began to align with unsettling clarity. A shift was happening, a reversal of power I had never expected. I pressed my palm against the table and steadied my breath. The night felt deeper. The silence felt sharper. The world I knew had tilted once again, and this time the weight of it settled squarely on me. I stayed at the kitchen table long after I had finished reading the document. The power of attorney form lay open beneath the warm light, its legal language turning heavier each time my eyes traveled across it. I could feel my pulse in my wrists. My own signature stared back at me from the bottom of the page, slanted and uneven. Nothing like the steady handwriting I had taught myself to perfect during years of cataloging books. I traced the edge of the paper with my finger. The memory of signing it refused to form. All I could recall was Lydia handing me a folder on Thanksgiving and telling me it was something routine. She had stepped close, touched my arm, and said she would help me fill it out later. Trust had carried the rest. It had carried too much. I pressed my thumb against the signature. The ink had not faded. It belonged to me, yet felt like a stranger's mark. I tried to replay that Thanksgiving afternoon, the smell of roasted vegetables, the heat of the oven, the soft chatter in the background. I remembered trying to balance too many tasks at once. Lydia had hovered nearby with impatient energy. When she placed the document in front of me, I must have signed without reading it, letting the rhythm of motherhood guide my hand. Years of trusting my daughter had created an automatic response. I had given her the authority without realizing what I had surrendered. The realization settled over me like a cold draft. I leaned back in the chair, wrapped the blue scarf around myself, and closed my eyes. Harold's voice surfaced in my memory, steady as ever. He used to remind me that keeping a small corner of one's life reserved for oneself was not selfish. It was necessary. He would say that love could be generous and open, yet still firm enough to protect its own foundation. I had listened back then, but I had never mastered the practice. After he passed, I poured everything I had into Lydia, trying to fill the empty spaces his absence left behind. Perhaps I had filled too much. Perhaps I had blurred the line between giving and giving away. As I sat there, questions rose in my chest with a tightness that made it hard to breathe. Had I been too trusting, or had I placed too many expectations on Lydia without noticing? Had I assumed she would understand my sacrifices without ever speaking them aloud? The moral conflict pulled at me in opposing directions. I wanted to believe she loved me unconditionally. I also knew love did not behave the way it had behaved that morning. I opened my eyes and stared at the document once more. The truth was beginning to take shape, and it demanded honesty from me as well. There was a part of my past I rarely allowed myself to revisit, a truth I had tucked away because naming it felt like reopening an old wound. When Lydia was in her late 20s, she had dreamed of opening a boutique. She spoke of it with bright ambition and trembling uncertainty. I did not want her to face those fears alone, so I emptied the savings Harold and I had built over decades. I told her it was a loan, though I never meant to reclaim it. The shop failed within a year. The loss hardened something in her. She withdrew into a quiet resentment she never acknowledged, but never released. I carried the blame silently, convincing myself the sacrifice had been an act of love. Yet sitting at that table now, I wondered if it had planted a bitterness neither of us had tended to. The clock on the microwave blinked 2:40 in pale green digits. Outside, snow coated the world in a muted stillness. Inside, the truth formed sharper edges. Lydia had sought control over my life, her urgency at the bank, the pressure to drink the tea, the absence of concern when Grant collapsed, the hidden document assigning her full authority. These were not accidents. They were choices. I drew in a slow breath. My hands no longer shook. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that arrives only when denial finally loosens its grip. I folded the document carefully and placed it back inside the folder. Whatever came next would require clarity, not fear. I would not allow darkness to cloud my judgment. Morning would bring decisions. Morning would bring action. I rose from the chair, turned off the kitchen light, and walked toward my bedroom with a steadier stride than before. The scarf warmed my neck as if Harold were giving one final piece of guidance. At sunrise, I would call an attorney. Morning arrived with the muted gray light of winter, casting long shadows across my bedroom floor. I rose slowly, feeling the weight of the previous night settle into my bones with a clarity that no longer frightened me. I brewed a small pot of coffee, wrapped the blue scarf around my neck, and placed the folder containing the power of attorney document into my bag. My hands were steady. The decision had already been made hours earlier when the truth cut through the quiet and left no room for hesitation. Today, I would reclaim the pieces of my life that had been quietly taken from me. Avery Cole's office sat in a modest brick building on the east side of town. It was a place I had visited only once before, years ago, when Harold and I prepared our wills together. Avery had been Harold's childhood friend, a man known for his calm presence and unwavering principles. At 55, he carried himself with the same quiet steadiness Harold once had. When I stepped into his waiting room, the familiar scent of polished wood and old law books greeted me. It felt like stepping into a chamber where truth was weighed carefully rather than avoided. His assistant ushered me in. Avery rose from behind his desk and extended a warm, steady hand. He studied my face with a level of concern that softened the knot in my chest. After a brief greeting, he motioned toward the chair across from him. I sat down and placed the folder on his desk without a word. He opened it, adjusted his glasses, and began reading. The silence in the room shifted. It was no longer the silence of uncertainty, but the silence of comprehension. Avery read each page thoroughly, tracing a finger along the lines as if confirming details twice. When he finally looked up, his expression carried the weight of both professional seriousness and personal disappointment. His voice was calm but firm. "Fiona, do you understand what you signed?" I held his gaze. My answer came out steady, shaped by a mixture of regret and acceptance. I trusted my daughter. Avery leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose as if searching for the right response. Trust is important, but this document grants her full authority over every aspect of your decision-making. Medical, financial, legal, all of it. With this in place, she could make irreversible choices on your behalf, choices you may not agree with. I nodded. Hearing the truth spoken aloud tightened something deep inside me. It stripped away the last layer of denial with a precision only honesty could deliver. He continued, "The signature appears rushed. You must not sign anything without reviewing it first, even with family, especially with my family." His words were not unkind. They were grounded in reality, delivered with the sort of clarity Harold always admired in him. I folded my hands in my lap, the blue scarf warming my collarbone as if Harold were standing behind me. "What can I do now?" I asked. Avery reached for a blank set of forms and placed them in front of me. "We revoke the power of attorney immediately. I will prepare a revocation document and file it today. Once it is processed, your daughter will no longer have legal authority over you. After that, I want you to visit your bank and review every recent transaction. Any unusual activity must be addressed quickly. We need to secure your accounts, update your beneficiaries, and document any concerns." His efficiency steadied me. It felt like breathing clean air after a long time spent in a room that had grown too dark. While he drafted the revocation, I studied the framed photographs lining his shelves. Most featured Harold and Avery fishing along the old rivers outside town. Their smiles looked easy and genuine. Those images reminded me that trust, when placed in the right hands, could be strong enough to rebuild what had been broken. Avery finished the draft, turned the document toward me, and handed me a pen. "Read every line, understand each word, then sign if everything is correct." I followed his instructions diligently, absorbing the meaning of each clause. When I finally signed my name, my handwriting returned to the steady form I recognized. It felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had not realized I had surrendered. "Good," Avery said with a quiet nod. "This is the first step. Once you secure your accounts and assets, We can discuss long-term protections. You are not alone in this, Fiona." His reassurance settled into me like a small flame against cold air. I thanked him, gathered my belongings, and stepped out into the brisk winter afternoon. The sky hung low, heavy with pale clouds. I walked toward my car, the sound of crunching snow under my boots grounding me. As I reached the sidewalk, someone called my name. It was Elliot Barnes. He stood near the edge of his driveway, hands tucked into the pockets of his coat. His expression held a mixture of relief and quiet concern. I had not expected to see him there, yet something about his presence felt fitting, as though the universe placed him in that moment to reflect what I had just begun to accept. "You are out early," he said gently. "I had some things to take care of," I replied. He studied me for a moment, noticing perhaps the subtle shift in the way I carried myself. His gaze softened. "Good. Sometimes silence is wisdom, but sometimes silence is dangerous, especially when people expect you to stay quiet." His words pierced the air with a clarity that felt almost prophetic. They echoed the truth I had been circling for days. I felt my breath deepen, and for the first time in a long while, I did not shrink from the weight of someone truly seeing me. "You are right," I said. "It is time to stop being quiet." Elliot nodded with understanding. "If you ever need anything, I am next door." I thanked him and continued to my car. As I drove away, the world outside my window looked the same as it always had, yet something fundamental inside me had shifted. For the first time in years, I felt the beginning of a power returning to my hands. Not loud, not forceful, quiet, steady, my own, and it was enough. The next morning, I drove to the bank with the revocation document tucked safely inside my coat pocket. Avery's instructions echoed in my mind with steady purpose. The winter air clung to the edges of the windshield as I parked and stepped out, feeling the weight of responsibility shift squarely onto my shoulders. For years, I had assumed my accounts were untouched, protected by simple trust. Today, I would learn what trust had cost me. Inside the bank, warm air and the faint scent of paper greeted me. Clara Min, a young woman with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, approached when I asked for assistance. She guided me to a small office tucked near the back, away from the foot traffic and noise. The privacy eased me a little, though a thread of apprehension tightened around my ribs. Clara began by logging into my accounts on her computer. "We will start with recent transactions," she said gently. Her tone carried no judgment, only professionalism and an understanding I had not expected from someone her age. She scrolled through the activity, her brows knitting as line after line appeared. At first, the withdrawals seemed ordinary, small amounts, modest purchases, and routine payments. Then she clicked to expand the 3-month history, and the list grew uneven. My heart stills. Repeated transfers of $80, $100, $95, always spaced a few days apart, always labeled as discretionary spending. I leaned forward, squinting at the screen. "I did not make those," I said quietly. Clara nodded slowly, as if she had already suspected. She clicked again, revealing a recurring payment labeled Family Support, $800 withdrawn on the 15th of every month. The recipient was Lydia. A dull ache formed at the base of my throat. I never set that up. Clara folded her hands on the desk. "It appears to have been active for almost a year." Almost a year. The realization tightened around me like a band pulled too close. While I had been clipping coupons, reusing tea bags, and watching my expenses carefully, my daughter had been receiving a monthly transfer without my knowledge. I searched for an explanation, but all I found was the memory of her distant smile each time I mentioned needing to budget carefully. She had said nothing, not once. Clara continued scrolling. More details surfaced. The largest transaction appeared near the top of the screen, listed as payment for home medical equipment. It was a significant amount, enough to replace an entire furnace, enough to pay several months of my mortgage when Harold was still alive. I stared at the number, trying to make sense of it. "I have never purchased medical equipment," I said. "I have no need for it." Clara clicked the transaction for details. The invoice listed an address that was not mine. It was Lydia's. My breath left me in a short, controlled exhale. There was no denying it. Lydia had not only accessed my account, but used it for her personal expenses. The truth lay before me in black and white. Numbers did not lie. Patterns did not lie. Only people did. Clara turned to me with a careful expression. "Mrs. Merritt, would you like to remove all authorized users from your account?" "Yes," I said, immediately. She nodded and moved quickly through the process. I watched her fingers glide across the keyboard with firm efficiency. She reset my security questions, updated the password, removed Lydia from all permissions, and added enhanced verification procedures. When she finished, she handed me a printed packet outlining the changes. "You are now the sole person with access," she said. "No one else can make transfers or view your information." Relief did not come. Not yet. Instead, a quiet heaviness settled over me, the kind that comes when reality replaces denial. Lydia had taken advantage of me. Not once, not twice, repeatedly, deliberately. Clara hesitated, then spoke with a softness that carried unexpected weight. "You would be surprised how many parents come in for the same reason. More than you might imagine." Her words struck deeper than she intended. They carried a truth echoing Avery's advice and Elliot's warning. Silence could be dangerous, trust could be misused, and love, when taken for granted, could become a doorway to harm. I gathered my papers, thanked her, and rose to leave. As I stepped out of the office, the world seemed sharper. The hum of the bank, the faint clatter of keyboards, the shuffle of customers waiting in line. Everything felt like a reminder that life continued even when one's world changed beneath the surface. Walking back to my car, I felt the cold air embrace me again. It no longer felt paralyzing. It felt cleansing. Today, numbers had spoken what words never had, and I could no longer unhear them. The drive home from the bank felt longer than usual. Snow drifted across the road in slow spirals, and my wipers brushed it aside with steady rhythm. The documents Clara had printed for me rested on the passenger seat, weighted by a sense of finality. The truth about the withdrawals and transfers clung to my thoughts, not as a sudden shock, but as a confirmation of something deeper that had been stirring inside me for days. Trust had been broken long before I had ever noticed the cracks. When I reached my house, the cold air pressed against me as I stepped from the car. I wrapped my scarf tighter and walked inside, locking the door with deliberate care. The house greeted me with its familiar quiet, but today the quiet felt different. It no longer held the comfort of solitude. It held a question I was not ready to answer. I made tea, sat in Harold's old armchair, and tried to steady myself. That was when my phone buzzed. The screen displayed Nathan's name. My grandson rarely called without notice. He was an 18-year-old boy with a gentle heart and an earnestness that had not been dimmed by the world yet. He'd always been kind to me, always observant in quiet ways. I answered quickly. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. Silence greeted me first, not the casual silence of a teenager searching for words. This was heavier, careful, almost frightened. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled around the edges. "Grandma," he whispered, "are you home right now?" "Yes, I am. Is everything all right?" His breath shook. I could hear him pacing, the faint echo of footsteps against hardwood. "I need to tell you something," he said, "but you have to promise you will not tell Mom I called." My hand tightened around the mug. "Nathan, whatever it is, you can tell me. I am listening." He inhaled deeply, as if gathering courage. "A few days ago, I heard Mom talking to Grant. They did not know I was upstairs. They thought I was at practice." He paused, voice cracking. "They were talking about you." The room shifted around me, though nothing had moved. "What did they say?" His answer came like a thread pulled too fast. "Mom told him that if you drank what she made, then everything would be done before the new year." I did not speak. I did not breathe. My pulse thudded quietly in my ears, steady and contained. Nathan rushed to continue, as if afraid I might hang up or misunderstand. "She said something about doctors and how they just needed confirmation. She said it would not take long before you started getting confused. She said they were planning everything. My eyes drifted toward the window. Snow continued falling in soft sheets. Nothing outside reflected the storm inside my chest. "Nathan," I said slowly, "are you certain those were her words?" "Yes," he whispered. "Grandma, I did not mean to listen, I swear, but when I heard your name, I froze. I just stayed there and—" He swallowed hard. "I recorded part of it. I did not know what else to do. I did not want to believe it." The line buzzed faintly as he sent the audio file. My phone chimed. A small icon appeared on the screen, waiting. "Grandma, please do not be mad. I just thought you needed to know." I lowered my voice to calm him. "I am not angry, sweetheart. You did the right thing." He exhaled sharply, the sound of a young man carrying a burden too heavy for his age. "I do not know what they are doing. I do not know why. I just know it sounded wrong." I opened the file. The recording crackled with low background noise. Then the voices emerged. Lydia's first. Clear despite the muffled distance. Calm in a way that made my ribs tighten. She will not question it. She never does. Once she starts slipping, the doctor will sign the evaluation. After that, everything will be handled. Grant's voice followed. "How long will it take?" "She is already forgetful. It will not be long. We just need her to drink it." My heart did not race. My breath did not quicken. The world slowed, stretching each syllable into something sharp and undeniable. The weight of their intentions pressed upon my chest with the cold certainty of ice. I paused the recording. Nathan's voice returned. "Grandma, please say something." I closed my eyes, not to shut out the world, but to steady the truth inside me. I felt no tears, not yet. Grief would come later, in its own time. In this moment, silence carried more power than any reaction I could force. "I'm still here, Nathan," I said softly. "I was scared," he murmured. "I did not want you to be hurt." "You did the brave thing," I told him. "You trusted your instincts. That matters," he sniffed, embarrassed by the emotion he could not hide. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the scarf around my shoulders, its blue woven threads catching the muted light. Harold's voice echoed from memory, reminding me that strength did not always roar. Sometimes it whispered. Sometimes it stood still. Sometimes I listened. "I'm going to take care of myself," I said. "Do you want me to come over?" he asked. "No, sweetheart, you stay where you are. You have carried enough for one day." He hesitated, then said, "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too," I whispered. When the call ended, the house returned to its quiet state, yet something inside me had changed. The truth, spoken by someone who still believed in goodness, had stripped away the last veil of doubt. Lydia had made her choice. Grant had supported it. They had planned a future built on my erasure, but the world had shifted. They no longer held that power. I set my phone down and let the silence fill the room. It was no longer a silence of confusion or denial. It was a silent decision. A silence that gathered itself like a steady current beneath still water. A silence that belonged to me. The morning after Nathan's confession, I moved through my house with a calm I could not fully explain. My steps were steady, my breath even, as if something inside me had clicked into place. The truth had rearranged my understanding of my daughter, and once truth rearranges a life, nothing returns to its former shape. I folded the revocation papers from Avery, placed the bank statements beside them, and set my phone on the table with the recording already cued. I did not know when Lydia would come, but I sensed she would. People often return when they fear losing what they assumed would always remain within reach. I spent the early afternoon sorting through Harold's old toolbox, not because I needed anything from it, but because touching familiar things steadied me. The house was quiet, a quiet that no longer felt lonely. It felt intentional. It felt like preparation. Around 3 o'clock, I heard footsteps on the porch. They were hesitant at first, then forced into brightness as if someone had rehearsed them on the way up the steps. A moment later, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Lydia stood there holding a casserole dish covered with foil. Her smile was tight around the edges, stretched thin over something sharp and unsettled. "Mom," she said, lifting the dish slightly. "I made you something to eat. I thought you might need a warm meal to keep your strength up." Her voice carried a tremor she tried to hide. The tremor did not come from care. It came from fear. I stepped aside. "You can come in." She entered, her eyes darting around the room, scanning for signs of my mood, for evidence of what I might know. I watched her quietly, giving her no clues. The silence between us rested heavy, but I allowed it to remain. Silence has a shape when used intentionally. It can force a person to fill it with their own guilt. She placed the casserole on the counter and began removing her gloves, speaking too lightly. "You have not been answering my texts since Christmas. I was worried. You seemed a little confused that morning, so I just wanted to check on you." There it was, the opening move, a seed planted to paint me as forgetful, unstable, diminishing. I said nothing. I simply turned and walked to the table where the documents waited. My quietness unsettled her more than any words I could have chosen. She continued, trying again. "Mom, we all forget things sometimes. There is no shame in that. You have a lot on your mind lately. Holidays can be stressful." I pulled out a chair and sat down, then gestured for her to do the same. She hesitated, sensing a shift she could not yet define, but eventually lowered herself into the seat across from me. For a long moment, I did not speak. I studied her face the way one studies a painting they have seen all their life, but suddenly notices anew. Her eyes avoided mine. Her fingers tightened around one another. Her breath caught in small, uneven pulls. Slowly, I placed the first sheet of paper between us, my recent bank statements. Her eyes flicked toward them. Her posture stiffened. She forced a smile. "What is this?" I did not answer. I let the silence fill the space so densely she could not escape it. She inhaled sharply. "Mom, if you have questions, you should tell me. I can help you understand." I placed the second document on the table, the revocation of the power of attorney. This time, her reaction was immediate. Her hand jerked slightly. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Why did you do that?" "Mom, you must have misunderstood something. I was only trying to help you with your responsibilities. You know things can be overwhelming." Still, I remained quiet. The rustle of paper in the still room became louder than any argument she could make. Her eyes widened. "Mom, please say something. You are scaring me." I reached for my phone. Her breath hitched when she saw the screen light up. "What is that?" I pressed play. The recording began with the soft background hum from Nathan's hallway. Then the unmistakable voices of my daughter and her husband filled the room. Their tones were calm, calculated, without remorse. "Once she drinks it, the doctor will verify everything. She will not question it. She will start slipping soon." I paused the recording before the next line could finish its cruel descent into the air. Lydia's face was drained of color, her shoulders slumped. Her lips parted, but no sound came out for several seconds. When she finally spoke, her voice came out thin and uneven, unraveling with panic. "Mom, that is not what it sounds like. I swear, you are misunderstanding everything. Grant and I were just talking about nothing serious. It was taken out of context." Her hands shook as she reached for mine, but I pulled my hand back gently, not harshly, simply final. She swallowed hard, tears rising but not falling. "Mom, I would never hurt you. You are imagining things. You know how memory can be." Her attempt to rewrite reality landed with a hollow thud. She knew I was not confused. She knew the truth had cornered her. She knew the silence I held now was deliberate, not feeble. I leaned back, letting the quiet expand until it reached every corner of the room. Then, in a voice calm enough to split the moment in half, I said, "You can leave." Her breath caught. "Mom, please. Let me explain. You cannot just shut me out. I am your daughter. Please listen to me." I remained still. The quiet around us grew dense, impenetrable. Silence, when chosen, becomes a mirror, and she could not bear her own reflection. She rose abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice broke into a frantic plea. "Say something. Tell me you do not believe this. Mom, please." I kept my gaze steady, My stillness told her everything. She waited for a response that would not come. Then, with a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob, she moved toward the door. When she opened it, the cold winter air swept in, carrying her panic with it. She looked back one last time, tears trembling in her eyes. "You are making a mistake." I did not reply. She stepped outside, and the door closed behind her with a soft, final click. The silence she left behind did not feel empty. It felt like truth reclaiming its rightful place. 2 days after Lydia's visit, the house settled into a quiet that felt earned rather than imposed. I woke early, brewed coffee, and sat with the stillness that followed her departure. Silence had become an ally again, not the suffocating barrier it had been when I still clung to denial. The morning sun filtered through the curtains in pale gold lines, and for the first time since Christmas, I felt the rhythm of my own life return to me. By noon, I had begun sorting Harold's old documents. I kept them inside a wooden file box he crafted during his final summer, a box with dovetail joints and a brass latch he polished every Sunday. It has become one of my most cherished anchors. Inside were neatly filed folders containing medical logs, property records, insurance papers, and old letters we never had the heart to throw away. Today I reviewed each item with a clarity I had not possessed before. "Order steadies the mind," Harold used to say, and I felt the truth of that again. I had just closed the lid when the doorbell rang. The sound was sharp, unexpected, not hesitant like Lydia's visit, not familiar like Elliot's knock. It carried a different note entirely. I walked to the door and opened it to find a woman bundled in a dark coat, a badge clipped neatly to her lapel. "Mrs. Fiona Merritt?" she asked in a professional tone. "Yes," I replied, steadying myself. She offered a small, respectful nod. "My name is Dana Whitmore. I am with Adult Protective Services. We received a report expressing concern about possible self-neglect. I am here to check on your well-being." Her words settled between us with the cold weight of foreseen inevitability. A report, anonymous, of course. There was only one person who would submit such a thing, and she did not live far from my front porch. I opened the door wider. "Please come in." Dana entered with quiet steps, glancing around the living room. She carried a tablet in her hands and maintained a neutral, attentive posture. I motioned toward the dining table, the same table where Lydia's facade had cracked days earlier. "Would you like to sit?" I asked. "Thank you," she said. "We can talk wherever you feel comfortable." I chose to sit across from her, the wooden file box within reach. Her eyes flicked toward it, noting its organization. She began with standard questions: my age, my daily routines, my physical health, my ability to manage food, medication, transportation, finances. Each question was asked politely, respectfully, without condescension. I answered each one clearly and concisely. Yes, I prepare my own meals. Yes, I manage my own medications. Yes, I drive only during daytime hours. Yes, I attend my appointments. No, I have not experienced confusion. No, I have not misplaced items of concern. No, I have not missed bill payments. Her stylus hovered above the tablet as she typed, her expression shifting from practiced inspection to genuine curiosity. When she asked whether I had support nearby, I thought of Elliot. "My neighbor checks in on me regularly. My grandson does too." "And your daughter?" she asked, watching me carefully. For a moment, I allowed silence to rest on the table, not out of hesitation, but because the question itself felt like a measurement of truth. "My daughter does not assist me," I said calmly. Dana nodded once. "May I ask whether anything recent may have prompted someone to worry about you?" Rather than answering directly, I reached for the wooden file box. I opened it slowly, letting her observe the deliberate organization inside. Neatly tabbed folders, dated records, labeled envelopes, a lifetime cataloged with care. "These are my medical records," I said, placing the first folder in front of her. "Annual checkups, vaccination charts, and procedure notes." I lifted another. "These are property and financial documents, all current, all accounted for." Another folder followed. "These are recent statements from my bank, including evidence that I revoked my daughter's power of attorney and secured my accounts." Her eyes widened slightly, not in alarm, but in recognition of the intentional order before her. "There is more," I continued. I retrieved the folder from Avery, laying it gently beside the others. "This contains legal correspondence." Dana studied everything with a measured gaze, taking her time. When she finished, she leaned back, processing. "Mrs. Merritt," she said slowly, "it is very uncommon for someone reported for self-neglect to have this level of organization. Your records are meticulous." I met her eyes. "I take care of myself." "Yes, that is very clear." She paused, choosing her next words with care. "Would you be comfortable sharing why someone might believe otherwise?" I let another moment of silence settle, a silence that allowed the truth to speak without being spoken. "My daughter recently became aware that I revoked her legal access to my affairs," I finally said. "She may not have appreciated that decision." Dana absorbed that with a quiet understanding I did not expect. She was trained to recognize patterns. She knew the difference between genuine concern and reactive retaliation. "Thank you for your honesty," she said. "I want to assure you that everything I've observed today reflects stability, competence, and mental clarity. I have no reason to believe you are at risk or unable to care for yourself." She closed her tablet, though she did not stand yet. Instead, she looked around the room once more, taking in the small evidence of a life lived with structure. Books neatly shelved, plants watered, a calendar marked with appointments, a kitchen clean but used. "It is rare," she said thoughtfully, "to see someone maintain this level of order, especially during stressful times." Stressful times. The phrase hung in the air, gentle but pointed. I nodded. "Order helps me breathe." Dana smiled softly. "Then breathe easy. You are doing quite well." Her reassurance warmed something inside me, something wounded but not broken. She gathered her things and walked to the door. Before she stepped outside, she turned slightly. "One more thing," she said. "Anonymous reports come in for many reasons, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of malice. But I will note clearly in my file that you are fully capable. You have nothing to worry about." I thanked her, closed the door behind her, and leaned against it for a quiet moment. This time, the silence in my home did not feel like an absence. It felt like a victory. I walked back to Harold's file box, placed the folders inside, and closed the lid with calm finality. The brass latch clicked softly. I could almost hear Harold's voice again, steady and reassuring. Order steadies the mind, and today, the order I had kept within myself had become the shield that protected me. Lydia had chosen a weapon she believed would break me, but she had underestimated the power of truth, competence, and silence. 2 days after the APS visit, I drove back to Avery Cole's office with a steadiness I had not felt in years. The winter sun hung low, painting the road in muted gold. There was no trembling in my hands, no hesitation in my breath. The truth had carved out a new path for me, one I intended to follow with intention. Lydia had made her choices. Now it was my turn to make mine. Avery greeted me with the same calm professionalism he always carried, though today his expression softened when he saw the briefcase tucked under my arm. "You look different," he said, "stronger." "I feel different," I replied. We sat down across from each other, and I opened the briefcase, pulling out the documents I had prepared. "I want to establish a trust," I told him, "something secure, something that keeps my future in my own hands." Avery nodded as if he had expected this. "A revocable living trust would give you full control. You choose the beneficiaries. You dictate the terms. No one can interfere without triggering consequences." "Then that is what I want," I said. He reached for a yellow legal pad. "Tell me your intentions." I spoke slowly, choosing each word with deliberate clarity. "My grandson, Nathan, will be the primary beneficiary. He has earned it through honesty, not expectation. I want protections in place. No one who challenges the trust or exerts pressure over me should receive anything." Avery wrote quickly, his pen gliding in firm strokes. "That clause is enforceable. It is called a no-contest provision. If anyone disputes your decisions, they forfeit what they might have inherited. That is exactly what I need, I said. He looked up. Are you sure? I am, I answered. Boundaries are kinder when they are clear. Avery let a quiet smile form. Harold would be proud of you. The mention of Harold warmed my chest. He always said, strength does not need volume, it needs clarity. We spent the next hour crafting the structure of the trust. My house, my savings, my modest investments, and the items of sentimental value were all placed under its protection. Everything I had built, preserved, or sacrificed for would now follow a path defined by my own hand. When the final draft was ready, Avery slid the document toward me. Read it carefully. Make sure every line reflects your wishes. I reviewed each clause, each condition, each protection. The words formed a shield I had never known I needed. When I reached the no contest clause, my pulse slowed into something calm and sure. I signed. Avery notarized it, stamped it, and sealed it in a thick folder. Your trust is active. Anyone who attempts to manipulate you now risks losing everything. I exhaled, long and steady, as if releasing years of unspoken weight. This feels right. It is right, Avery said. You've taken back your life. When I stepped outside, the cold winter air felt brighter against my skin. Snow glittered along the sidewalk, and the wind carried a crisp scent of pine. I walked toward my car, but before I reached it, I heard someone call my name. It was Elliot, clearing snow from his front steps. He straightened when he saw me and gave a small wave. I walked over, grateful for the familiar warmth in his eyes. You look lighter today, he observed. I made some decisions, I said. He rested his gloved hands on the top of his shovel. Good decisions, I hope. Necessary ones, I replied. He studied me for a quiet moment, then said something that felt as if it had been waiting for the perfect day. There are doors we close out of anger, and there are doors we close out of self-respect. The second kind never needs apology. His words settled deep, aligning with the trust I had signed only an hour earlier. I think I finally understand that, I said. He nodded gently. Then you are going to be all right. As I walked back to my house, the weight around my heart eased in small increments. Boundary by boundary, truth by truth, decision by decision. For the first time in a very long time, the air around me felt wide enough to breathe. I was reclaiming my life, not loudly, not violently, but steadily. And that steadiness was its own kind of freedom. For several days, the house rested in a peaceful stillness that felt almost foreign. I woke each morning without the tightening in my chest, without the familiar worry that Lydia might appear at my door or that another hidden crisis waited to unravel. The trust was established. My accounts were secured. APS had closed their visit with confidence in my capacity. For the first time in a long while, my life had edges again, boundaries shaped by intention rather than fear. But quiet does not always mean the world has settled. It was late afternoon when my phone rang for the first time. I was standing near the window, watching sunlight melt the snow on the branches. Nathan had visited earlier and left a small drawing he made as a child, tucked under a book on my coffee table. It showed my house with a bright yellow sun and two stick figures holding hands. He had drawn me taller than him, with a blue scarf trailing behind. I held the drawing gently, letting the memory warm something tender inside me. The ringing phone cut through the moment. Lydia's name glowed across the screen. I did not answer. She called again, and again, 5 times in a row. Her persistence throbbed through the quiet like a pulse. When she finally stopped calling, the first voicemail appeared, then the second, then the third. By evening, there were 9 messages waiting. I did not rush to listen. I made tea first, carried the mug to the window, and wrapped Harold's blue scarf around my shoulders. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the snow-covered yard. Only then did I press play. Her voice burst into the room with sharp, frantic energy. "Mom, what are you doing? Why did you shut me out? You're being dramatic. Call me back right now." I let the message play until the end, then moved to the next one. Mom, please, I am trying to understand what is happening. People do things out of love. You need to remember that. Her tone softened in the third voicemail, shifting toward a pleading rhythm. I am sorry if things got confusing. You were overwhelmed lately. I was trying to help you. Grant was trying to help you too. You are not being fair. The fourth message cracked in the middle. Mom, you cannot cut me out of your life. Families have problems. We work through them. We forgive each other. She paused long enough that I could hear her swallow. Then a trembling whisper followed. Please do not leave me. I closed my eyes and listened, not to her words, but to their edges. They carried no accountability, no truth, only desperation to regain access to what she believed she deserved. The fifth voicemail arrived with a different tone entirely. I know what you are doing. Someone is putting ideas in your head. You are listening to the wrong people. You cannot handle everything alone. You need me. A slow ache stirred beneath my ribs. For years, I had mistaken this tone for concern. Now I could hear the control beneath it with new clarity. The sixth voicemail arrived only minutes later. This is ridiculous. You cannot revoke legal documents without talking to me first. You do not understand what you are doing. Call me immediately. Her voice shook with anger she could no longer contain. I kept listening, holding the blue scarf gently between my fingers. The wool felt soft, familiar, grounding. The seventh voicemail arrived in a rush. You owe me a conversation. After everything I have done for you, after everything I sacrificed, you cannot just erase me. Erase her. The irony struck with quiet precision. She had spent nearly a year siphoning money from my accounts. She had discussed accelerating my cognitive decline. She had attempted to seize control of my legal autonomy. And now she accused me of erasing her. The eighth voicemail trembled with panic. Mom, please just pick up. I cannot lose you. You are all I have. I did not mean any harm, I swear. Grant did not either. We were scared you could not handle things anymore. I paused the message. Fear can twist truth, but it cannot erase intention. Then I pressed play on the final voicemail. It began with silence, then a long, uneven inhale. You know what? She said, her voice drained and cold. If you want to ruin your life, go ahead. Do not come crying to me when everything falls apart, but do not blame me for trying to help. The message ended with a click. I stood still, letting the quiet seep back into the room. Outside, the sun had slipped behind the trees, leaving the sky brushed with lavender. The blue scarf rested around my neck, carrying Harold's warmth into the fading light. I scrolled through the messages again, not to listen, but to hold the weight of them in my hands. They traveled through every familiar stage: accusation, pleading, manipulation, self-pity, anger. They were the complete cycle of a person confronted by truth they refused to face. And somewhere inside that cycle was a grief I could not deny. I loved my daughter. Love does not disappear because trust breaks. Love does not vanish because someone chooses harm over honesty. Love does not evaporate simply because silence becomes necessary. I pressed my palm against the window pane, feeling the cold seep through the glass. The scarf brushed my wrist, reminding me of another truth I had carried quietly for a decade. 10 years ago, Grant had fallen into debt, deep enough that bankruptcy hovered over him like a shadow. Lydia had begged him not to tell anyone, terrified of looking weak, terrified that their friends would see her husband as a failure. I took money from Harold's last savings account, the one we had kept untouched for emergencies. I paid the debt in full. I never told Lydia. Not because I wanted gratitude, but because I did not want her marriage to fracture under the weight of humiliation. I held that secret for years, believing silence protected her. But silence, I had learned, can protect or destroy. It depends on its direction. I returned to the table, opened my phone, and began deleting each voicemail, one by one, slowly, intentionally. Not out of anger, not out of revenge. Out of recognition that not every bridge must be crossed again, simply because someone demands it. When the final message disappeared, I exhaled. The room felt lighter, not empty. My heart felt steadier. not hardened. Loving someone does not require offering them the power to harm you. I wrapped the blue scarf closer around my shoulders and stood by the window as the evening settled softly across the yard. Silence no longer frightened me. It felt like healing. It felt like truth choosing its own light, and it belonged to me. Spring arrived slowly, almost shyly, as if unsure whether the world was ready for gentler days. I felt the shift before I saw it. The air softened, the light stretched longer across my kitchen floor. Even the silence inside my home changed shape, no longer tight with tension, but open and breathable. After everything winter had taken from me, spring offered something back. I decided it was time to learn something new, something for myself, not for anyone else's expectations. So I joined a small art class at the community center. The instructor, a woman with silver hair and paint smudged on every sweater she owned, told us that drawing was less about accuracy and more about noticing. I found comfort in that. For years I had noticed too much, sometimes in ways that hurt. Now I noticed the curve of a bowl, the shadow beneath a vase, the quiet way pencil marks could suggest emotion without words. On Tuesdays, I added a pottery class. My hands were clumsy at first, the clay wobbling beneath every touch, but the slow turn of the wheel calmed me. There was something healing in shaping something new with steady, patient pressure. When the clay resisted, the instructor reminded us that tension could be softened with water and time. That idea lingered with me long after each class ended. Elliot and I began walking together in the afternoons. Nothing romantic, nothing weighted with expectation. Just two neighbors letting the sun warm their steps. He talked about the garden he wanted to plant. I talked about the art pieces I hoped to finish one day. Our conversations drifted easily, shaped by the quiet comfort of companionship. He never pressed for details about Lydia, and I appreciated that more than I could say. Some wounds do not need an audience. They only need space. One Saturday, Nathan came to visit. He had grown taller since winter, his shoulders broader, his face a little older in ways experience can shape a young man. He hugged me with a sincerity that felt like a second spring inside my chest. After we ate lunch, he sat across from me, fiddling with the corner of his sleeve. "Grandma," he said, "I thought you should know something. Mom and Grant moved. They left 2 weeks ago. They said they needed a fresh start, but people are saying they left because of debt." I let the words rest quietly between us. He watched me, waiting for a reaction he feared might break me again. Instead, I reached for my tea and took a slow breath. "Everyone has their own path," I said. "Some paths are chosen, some are learned the hard way." Nathan lowered his gaze, relief softening his shoulders. "I just wanted you to hear it from me." "I am glad you told me," I said. "But sweetheart, their journey is theirs to carry now, not mine." He nodded, the tension in his young face easing. There was nothing triumphant about the news, nothing vindicating, only a gentle understanding that life has a way of correcting what the heart cannot. After he left, I stepped onto the porch. The wind carried the scent of blooming cherry trees from down the street. I closed my eyes and let the air wash over me. The blue scarf brushed my neck, and Harold's memory rose with the breeze, steady and reassuring. A thought moved through me with quiet clarity. Silence is not only a boundary. Silence is also a prayer for peace, a prayer for strength, a prayer for the courage to release what no longer belongs in your hands. As the sun dipped lower, I looked out across the neighborhood. Children rode their bicycles. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Life continued, not loud or extraordinary, but gently, faithfully, and fully. And for the first time in a very long while, I felt myself returning to that rhythm. Spring had come, and freedom had come with it. Spring deepened into early summer, and the world outside my windows filled with the bright insistence of new life. Trees unfurled their leaves. Birds built nests under the eaves. My pottery pieces lined the shelves near the kitchen, each one imperfect but steady, each one shaped by my own hands. Healing rarely arrives in dramatic waves. It comes quietly, the way seasons shift. I feel that shift daily now. One morning, as sunlight filtered across the kitchen tiles, I heard the soft thud of mail slipping through the slot in my door. I did not hurry to check it. Most mail these days was practical: bills, newsletters, a friendly postcard from someone in my art class. But when I finally retrieved the stack, a single envelope caught my eye. My name is written in Lydia's handwriting. The address in the corner read Tucson, Arizona. I stood there for a moment, letting the envelope rest in my palm. It was thin, light, holding neither urgency nor weight, yet something in my chest tightened around it. Months had passed since her last voicemail. Months without manipulation, without crisis, without her shadow stretching across the decisions of my life. I had learned to breathe without bracing. I had learned to move without fear of the next blow. Still, a letter is a presence, even when it travels from far away. I carried it to the dining table and sat down, placing it gently beside my cup of tea. The blue scarf rested loosely around my shoulders, its familiar warmth anchoring me as it always did. After a long breath, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Lydia's cursive flowed across the page with practiced elegance. "Mom, I hope you are well. I am writing because I want you to understand that everything I did was out of love. I only wanted to help you. Things got out of hand, and I admit the situation became messy. But it was never my intention to hurt you. I just wanted what was best for you. I hope, in time, you can see that." There was more. Apologies sketched in vague outlines, sentences that circled responsibility but never touched it. Notes about her life in Arizona, her attempts to settle into a new job, the dry heat she disliked but was learning to tolerate. Words crafted with care, but not with accountability. Not with the truth. She ended with a single line. "I know you probably will not respond, but I wanted to say something anyway." I read the letter once, then again, and a third time, not for clarity, but for closure. She had not changed. Not in the way healing requires. Not in the way that rebuilds trust. She had softened her tone, yes, but softness is not the same as honesty. She said she wanted what was best for me, but wanting control is not the same as wanting someone's well-being. The realization came without bitterness. It simply settled into the open space inside me, the space where grief had slowly transformed into acceptance. I folded the letter along its creases and placed it inside the wooden file box Harold built. Not out of sentiment, but out of respect for the truth of the past. Some chapters deserve to be kept, not to be reopened, but to be acknowledged. As I closed the box, the brass latch clicked softly. The sound felt final in a gentle, necessary way. A moment later, I heard footsteps approaching my porch, light, familiar steps. I opened the door before the knock landed. Elliot stood there with a small basket of early cherries from the farmer's market. His face warmed with a smile when he saw me. "Good morning," he said. "I thought you might like these." "I always do," I replied, stepping aside so he could enter. He set the basket on the counter and noticed the open file box on the table. His gaze drifted to the folded envelope resting inside. He did not ask, not immediately. Instead, he poured us each a glass of cold water, handing one to me before leaning lightly against the counter. Finally, he spoke. "Letter from Arizona." I nodded. "Yes." "Do you want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "There is not much to say." He waited, giving me space, not pressure. After a moment, I continued. She apologized without apologizing, explained without explaining, said she meant well. That is all. Elliot studied my face with quiet understanding. He never rushed my reflections. That was something I had come to appreciate deeply. "Are you planning to write back?" he asked gently. I let the idea settle on my shoulders like a coat I was considering but did not wish to wear. I looked toward the window where sunlight flickered across the branches. "No," I said softly. "Not this time." He tilted his head, waiting for more. I smiled, a small but sure curve of my lips. "Not every door needs to be opened again." His expression eased into a knowing look, warm and respectful. "Then you have made peace with it?" "Yes," I replied. "Peace looks different than I thought it would. It is quieter, but it is mine." We sat at the table, sharing cherries, letting conversation drift toward lighter subjects. His garden, my pottery class, the upcoming community art show. Life continued in the soft, steady way spring promises. As the morning stretched into early afternoon, I walked him to the door. He paused on the porch, the breeze brushing through the leaves behind him. "You seem lighter," he said. "I am," I replied. After he left, I returned to the table and rested my hand on the wooden file box. The letter inside no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a marker on a path I had already traveled beyond. Silence settled around me again, but this silence did not ache. This silence prayed. It prayed for clarity, for mercy, for the strength to release what burdens the heart, for the courage to stand within one's own freedom. And as the afternoon light deepened, I felt the quiet empowerment of knowing that closure does not always require conversation. Sometimes closure is a choice to keep the door closed, a choice to breathe without looking back, a choice to continue the life I had begun reclaiming, step by quiet step. The first morning of early winter arrived with a soft glow that filtered across my porch like a gentle blessing. I carried my cup of coffee outside and sat in the old wooden chair Harold repaired countless times during our marriage. The air was crisp, tinged with hints of pine and the faint sweetness of distant chimney smoke. Frost clung to the railings, catching the light in small bursts of silver. I breathed it in slowly, letting it settle inside me with a steadiness that felt both new and ancient. Turning 70 was not something I had imagined with fear or regret. It arrived like this morning, quiet and unassuming, asking only that I witness it with honesty. I pulled the blue scarf closer around my shoulders, the one Harold knitted during his final winter. The wool held his memory in every thread, and wearing it felt like sitting inside the warmth of a promise kept. For years, I had wondered whether I was strong enough to carry my life alone. Now I know the answer. Strength is not loud. It rarely announces itself. It rises, patient, and persistent in the body that refuses to bow to fear. My phone buzzed beside me, pulling me gently from my thoughts. When I answered, Nathan's voice burst through with excitement so bright it lifted the morning another degree. "Grandma, I got it," he said. "I got the scholarship." Warmth spread through my chest, soft and full. "You did," I said, letting the pride in my voice rise without hesitation. "Tell me everything." He explained the details. A full scholarship to a university several hours away, a program he loved, professors who had encouraged him, the future he once doubted now stretching wide before him. While he spoke, I watched a light snow begin to fall, each flake drifting with a grace I had never fully appreciated until now. "That is wonderful news," I told him. "You earned every bit of it." He hesitated, voice softening. "I wanted you to be the first person I told." My throat tightened gently, not with sadness, but with a gratitude that reached deeper than words. "Thank you for that," I said. "You have a beautiful road ahead of you." We spoke a little longer before he promised to visit later in the week. When the call ended, I remained seated on the porch, letting the silence embrace me again. This silence felt different from the silences of the past. It did not carry the weight of fear or unanswered questions. It held peace. It held possibility. I looked out across the yard, remembering the years Harold and I had tended the garden together, the way he would kneel in the soil and talk to the seedlings as if they were old friends. I remembered the nights we whispered our dreams into the dark and the mornings we woke determined to make them real. His absence no longer felt like a wound. It felt like a guiding hand resting gently on my shoulder. The wind shifted, brushing the ends of my scarf against my cheek. I whispered into the cold, letting the words rise with my breath. "I kept the house, Harold, and I kept myself." In that moment, the world around me seemed to still, as if honoring the truth of the journey that had brought me here. I thought of everything that had been lost, my trust in Lydia, the illusion that love alone could shield me from harm, the belief that sacrifice must always be silent. Those losses had carved new space inside me, space filled not with bitterness but with clarity. I stepped down from the porch, my boots crunching lightly against the snow. Each step felt symbolic, like moving from one chapter into another. The sky above me brightened to a pale blue streaked with gold. My breath rose in small clouds, drifting upward before disappearing into the winter air. The yard stretched before me, familiar yet somehow renewed. I walked slowly across it, letting the cold kiss my face, letting the moment mark me. This was my life, not shaped by fear, not controlled by others, not held in silence, shaped by choice, held by truth, guided by the quiet strength I had reclaimed piece by piece. At the edge of the yard, I paused and looked back at the house I had fought so fiercely to keep. The windows reflected the morning light, the porch still waiting with the warmth of my cooling coffee. It stood steady, like a witness to everything I had endured and everything I had become. I wrapped the blue scarf more firmly around my neck, lifted my chin, and took another slow step forward into the widening day. I am 70 years old. I have lost many things, but I found something far more important. I found myself.